Calling our Consumer Protection and Commerce Committee hearing to order. We're here in conference room 329 and on Zoom for our 2 p.m. April 5th hearing. Today we'll be hearing 12 resolutions and 1 bill on today's agenda. So before we begin, I'd like to thank Chair Johansson for giving me the opportunity to lead today's hearing again. And I'd like to share just a few reminders. So if you're testifying on Zoom, we ask that you please have your name to match what you submitted on your testimony. That's so we can highlight you quicker. Also ask that you keep yourself on mute until you're called upon to minimize any background noise. And if you're testifying in person, welcome to our committee hearing today. If you can please come up to the podium so that everyone can hear what you're sharing and that it'll be captured on Zoom as well, that'll be great. We do have a 2-minute time limit, so when the timer goes off, we'll ask you to summarize what you're sharing. And as Chair Johansson always mentions, we just ask that you come here with aloha, and regardless of what position you are, and you've all done such a great job with that this whole session, so thank you so much for that. Okay, so we will get started on our first agenda item for today. It is HCR 46 and HR 41. This requests the Hawaii State Energy Office to engage the United States Department of Energy to establish a permanent presence within the state of Hawaii. So first up testifying, we have Dcca in support. Not here? Okay. Hawaii State Energy Office in support. Also not here. Okay. We also have indicating they would be present. We have Dcca, Division of Consumer Advocacy in support. Not here. Okay, we have HTDC, Len Higashi in support.
Thank you, chairs, vice chair, members of the committee. Len Higashi with Hawaii Technology Development Corporation. We stand on a written testimony in support of this measure, available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Len. Next, we have the University of Hawaii in support.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair. We stand on our testimony in support. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have submitted testimony in support from the Hawaii Public Utilities Commission. We have Hawaiian Electric in support, Hawaii Gas in support, NELHA in support, and the Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority in support. Is there anyone here wishing to testify on this measure? Either those that I called or anyone else who was not called? No? Okay, seeing none. Committee members, any questions? Okay, seeing no questions, we're going to move on to our next item, HCR 47, HR 42. This is requesting the Hawaii State Energy Office to convene a working group to examine issues and barriers to the installation of electric vehicle charging systems in multi-unit dwellings and to make recommendations regarding changes to statutes and rules or other guidance to help clarify and facilitate the installation of electric vehicle charging systems in multi-unit dwellings. First up, we have to testify in support is the Hawaii State Energy Office. Still not here. Okay. Next, we have Dcca, Division of Consumer Advocacy with comments.
Aloha and good afternoon, Chair and Vice Chair. I apologize for joining a little late, but I think you have our written testimony offering comments. I am available if you have any questions. Mahalo for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dean. Next up, we have Hawaiian Electric in support. June Chi, Hawaiian Electric. Oh, not here. Okay, they are in support. We also have indicating they would be present. We have Hawaii Auto Dealers Association in support.
Chair, Vice Chair, I'm David Rolfe with the Hawaii Auto Dealers Association in strong support of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Next up, we have Tesla in support. Not here, okay. We also have other on-time testimony from Ulupono Initiative in support, Hawaii Public Utilities Commission in support, Climate Protectors Hawaii in support, Alliance for Automotive Innovation in support, Big Island Electric Vehicle Association in support. Are any of them here? No? Okay, we also have late testimony with comments from NIA. Michael Iosua.
Aloha, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Mike Yoso on behalf of NIOP. I apologize for the late testimony, but we just wanted to make a few comments. We think it's a good intermediary step to help electric vehicle charging stations get implemented, but we feel like it's missing a few key components in terms of members of the working group. NIOP, other builders, affordable housing advocates, all should be involved in this working group because we're really the ones that are tasked with implementing these types of mandates. I think it's also important to bear in mind that, due to the substantial costs of these mandates, it's important to understand how electric vehicle charging installation or other type of infrastructure costs are built between the different developers. There's a wide range on how developers build projects, and this could weigh into what the costs are and whether it effectively kills a project. I would also add that with the rising interest rates, the cost of a home, which for electric vehicle charging station could add $12,000 to $20,000. Other mandates recently have added between $25,000 to $30,000. That can mean the difference between a local resident being able to purchase a home and qualify under a debt to income ratio and not being able to qualify. So I think it's imperative that you have the right people involved in this working group and can raise concerns like that, especially when we're trying to balance the interests of sustainability and affordable housing. Available for any questions. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on these measures? Seeing none, committee, please note that there are also individual testimony in support of these measures. Are there any questions? No? Okay, seeing none, we'll go on to our next agenda item. HCR 6, HR 2, requesting the United States Navy to prepare a plan to decommission the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility, storage fuel in a manner compliant with state law, establish a new water treatment facility, pay for all costs to the state, and comply with all future remediation efforts. First up to testify, we have DLNR in support.
Hello, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. Kaleo Manuel, Deputy with the Water Commission. We stand on our written testimony in support and offering comments. I'm here with staff, Ryan Imata as well. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, Kaleo. Next, we have the Board of Water Supply in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Kathy Mitchell with the Board of Water Supply. We stand on our written testimony in strong support of HCR 6 and HR 2.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank
We
you.
also have in support Department of Health. We have the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. We have Livable Hawaii Kai Hui and supportive late testimony from 350 Hawaii. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on these measures? Okay, seeing none, committee members, any questions? Seeing no questions, we'll move on to our next agenda item. HCR 28, requesting the auditor to assess the social and financial effects of mandatory health insurance coverage for fertility preservation procedures for certain persons who have been diagnosed with cancer and whose cancer or cancer treatment may adversely affect their fertility. We have the Office of the Auditor providing comments. We also have HMSA providing comments.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Garcia for HMSA. We support the intent of this resolution asking the auditor to study the impacts of these mandated benefits. We offer additional clauses that we hope will assist the auditor's office with to further refine their study. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Next up, we have the Hawaii Association of Health Plans offering comments. We also have the Hawaii Society of Clinical Oncology in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair Blake Oshore on behalf of the HSCO. We've submitted our written testimony in strong support of this resolution, and I will stand on that and be available for any questions.
Thank you, Blake. Next, we have testimony in support from Kaiser Permanente.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, John Kerm, and committee members. John Kermitsu for Kaiser. Kaiser stands on its testimony in support and requesting additional clauses for the auditor's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next up, we have, or also in support, we have Alliance for Fertility Preservation. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on this measure? Okay, seeing none, committee members, any questions? No questions. We're going to move on to our next item, HCR 33. This is requesting the auditor to conduct a social and financial assessment of proposed mandatory health insurance coverage for early access breast cancer screening. First up to testify, we have the Hawaii Medical Association in support.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair and Chair and members of the committee. Hawaii Medical Association stands on our written testimony and we're available for any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have the Department of Health with comments. We also have the Hawaii Society of Clinical Oncology in support. We have ACOG Hawaii in support and an individual, Christina Hulama, in support. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on this measure? Okay, seeing none, committee members, any questions? No questions. We're going to move on to our next item, HCR 66, HR 60. This is requesting the insurance commissioner to establish a telehealth and telephonic service working group to address the complexities surrounding the appropriate use of telehealth and telephonic services by specialty care area and coverage of these services by health insurance. First up to testify, we have DCCA Insurance Division offering comments.
Hi, Chair, Vice Chair, Ian Robertson for the DCCA Insurance Division. We stand on our written testimony offering comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Next up, who's indicated they would be present to testify, we have the Department of Human Services in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Judy Moore Peterson. I'm the MedQuest Administrator, and on behalf of the Department of Human Services, we stand on our written testimony. We do appreciate the intent of the resolution, offer some comments. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Next, we have HMSA in support.
Good afternoon again, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Garcia for HMSA. We are in strong support of HCR 66. HMSA is a strong supporter of telehealth as the first health plan in the nation to provide a telehealth platform, HMSA Online Care. As the technology and understanding of appropriate use of telehealth and telephonic services has evolved over the years, since the creation of the original telehealth state statutes and regulations, we believe the establishment of this working group is timely. We also support having the government entities in the second be it resolved clause choose among them who should chair the working group if that is the legislature's pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Lindsay. Next up, we also have Queens Health System in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. John Garibaldi with the Queens Health Systems. We're going to stand on our written testimony in support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. We also have submitting supportive testimony, the Disability and Communication Access Board, the Healthcare Association of Hawaii, the Hawaii Association of Health Plans, and the Hawaii Psychiatric Medical Association. Does anyone else here want to testify on this measure? Okay, seeing none, committee members, any questions? Okay, seeing no questions, we're going to move on to our next item. HCR 69, HR 62, designating the month of September 2022 as Child Care Provider Appreciation Month. First up to testify, we have Hawaii Children's Action Network Speaks in support.
Aloha, Chair Johansson and Vice Chair Kitagawa. Thank you so much for the opportunity to hear this measure. Kathleen Auger with White Children's Action Network Speaks. We stand in strong support. Since the beginning of the pandemic, childcare providers have really been there for families. Some of them never closed their doors. They allowed essential workers to go to work, for our emergency services to continue, for our hospital and community health center staff to be available to deal with the public health crisis. And so we feel it is an appropriate honor to recognize them in the month of September. So we hope you're able to support this measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. We also have submitting supportive testimony, Early Childhood Action Strategy, Hawaii Association of School Psychologists, the Early Learning Board, and numerous individuals. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on this measure? Okay, seeing none, committee members, any questions? No questions. We're going to move on to our next item. HCR 43, HR 38. This is requesting Hawaiian Electric Company to conduct a study to identify and remove any redundant utility poles on Oahu. First up to testify is the Hawaiian Electric Company in opposition.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Johansson, Vice Chair Kitagawa, and members of the committee. My name is Paul Nakagawa, and I'm testifying on behalf of Hawaiian Electric Company in opposition of HCR 43 and HR 38. I'd like to just quickly summarize my testimony if I can. We understand this redundant pole issue, and we know it's a serious issue, especially in the communities on the island of Oahu, because of the aesthetic issues as well as the potential safety hazard. But we are already aggressively working with the joint pole owners and others to identify and remove these redundant utility poles across Oahu. We also refer them as double poles. So we strongly believe that this resolution is unnecessary. We also want to clarify that there are redundant poles out there on Oahu that do not belong to Hawaiian Electric Company. So Hawaiian Electric Company is not responsible for every redundant pole issue out there. There's a good portion that we are responsible for, but I'd like to point out that there are other utilities and other entities that are responsible for some of those redundant poles out there. Also, I'd like to mention that, as I mentioned, we are working actively with the other attachers on our poles. Since 2018, we've identified approximately 12,100 double poles, these redundant backlog double poles, if you will, on our system. And since then, as of end of year 2021, we've addressed approximately 4,700 of them. So that leaves a backlog of roughly 7,400. And as I mentioned, we are actively working to correct those issues. When safety issues arise, whether it be from our own inspections or even through public calls to our customer service center, we evaluate those individual ones and we do place a priority on them, especially if we find out that can be a really safety hazard. And we will also work with the other entities or pole attachers to address their changeover so that the appropriate party can remove the pole. So therefore, again, in summary, we strongly oppose these two resolutions, and I'll be available for any questions. And thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Paul. We also have offering supportive testimony, the Outdoor Circle. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on these measures? Okay, seeing none, committee, any questions? Yes, Chair Johansson.
Thank you. Sorry. This is for the Hawaiian Electric Company, Paul.
Yes.
Thanks so much for your testimony. I think it was very helpful. I just wanted to ask a few clarifying questions.
Sure.
Because this comes up with our constituents. To what extent, you mentioned that HECO is not always the owner of the duplicate pole. To what extent is HECO working with, I'm guessing it would either be Hawaiian Telcom or whoever is the owner of the duplicate pole to get it removed rather than it just sitting there in sort of perpetuity?
Yeah, so if we get the call, which we get a lot of calls that are not the responsibility of us to remove, or we require others on the poles to move their facilities first before we can take any action. But if we get those calls, like you mentioned, where it's not our responsibility, we do notify Hawaiian Tel that, hey, this is your pole, you need to address this particular issue. Or even if it's the city and county for a streetlight pole or some other entity. We may not get all the calls, but if we do get the calls, we will work with the appropriate party to make sure that it gets addressed.
And to what extent does, Spectrum and Hawaiian Telecom coordinate, say in a scenario where both poles are yours,
Mm-hmm.
to what extent, because I'm guessing that's the only other infrastructure that would be on a older remaining pole. What is the plan and process to move those over to the new pole so that the old pole can be removed?
So if it's Spectrum, we on Oahu, we don't touch the Spectrum lines, but we'll call Spectrum and say, hey, we got a customer complaint. We need you to expedite your changeovers from the old pole to the new pole so we can go ahead and remove the old pole. Spectrum won't remove any joint poles. It's not in their agreement to remove joint poles that Hawaiian Electric was previously on. That's our responsibility. However, if Hawaiian Tel is on the pole, we have an agreement with Hawaiian Tel that certain type of transfers to remediate this double pole backlog, we will have an approved communication contractor transfer Hawaiian Tel's facilities over, and if the pole is clear, remove it. But if it's what we call a non-standard or more complicated type of Hawaiian Tel transfer, it's Hawaiian Tel's responsibility through an agreement we have with them to transfer over their facilities, and if they are last off, to remove the pole. But if they're not last off, then it falls upon us to remove that particular pole.
Chair, if I may, just a few more, sorry. And Hiko Paul is currently installing new poles, is that correct?
That is
So
correct.
this is an ongoing process?
Yes.
So, okay, so I guess what I'm wondering is the only catalyst for a removal of a outdated pole a complaint by, a nearby homeowner that says I have two poles?
No, it is not. It is a catalyst. It is one catalyst of several to remove the double poles, because our customers out there are eyes and ears out there. But we also have a commitment to remove these backlog double poles, but as well as not perpetuate or create double poles moving forward. So there's a process to clean up a backlog of double poles, which is like a snapshot in time. And then moving forward, as poles get installed, we are working to, better coordinate with the utilities, including Hawaiian Tel, because Hawaiian Tel is on a lot of our poles that we own, so that we don't perpetuate this double pole problem.
Okay, yeah, I guess I'll defer to the chair on what she does, but I guess I would say, because I can see in my district new poles going up, but there's no indication of what is happening with the old poles, that it seems that your backlog is only going to continue to grow. So this issue may keep coming up in our different communities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I have a few questions, Paul.
Okay.
Sorry.
No.
Okay, so in your testimony, you mentioned that Hawaiian Electric is performing an audit to confirm all your poll records. Can you explain what exactly your current audit entails? Like, what is included in this audit that you're already doing?
Okay, so on Oahu, there was a contractor that was hired by another part of our organization, Hawaiian Electric, if you will. It was to primarily identify all attachments on our distribution poles across Oahu. So right now we are waiting for the results of that particular audit. So part of that audit also includes the identification of double poles. So like I mentioned, through our own joint poll records, we identified 12,100 of these poles. But we are looking at somebody also confirming that by not only what we have on our records, but actual polls out in the field. Because we did find that, our records are not, unfortunately, 100% accurate, because it is what it is over time as the joint polls were replaced, and it was only as good as people notifying us. So we are trying to get a field audit completed of identifying the actual double polls out in the field.
Okay, when do you anticipate this audit to be given to HECO? Is there a timeline?
Yes, so the contractor is just about done, my understanding, on Oahu. However, the data is being scrubbed and evaluated by another group, not a group that I'm involved with. But so we're waiting for that results to see what that number will be, and we'll match it up with our own records. So
Okay.
I'd say before the end of the year, we should have an idea.
And then HECO has a record, when you say you have a record, right? You have a record of all the locations, like specific, like street name,
Yes,
address, where
correct.
double poles are.
Correct. So it is, as Chair Johansson said, it is all over the communities. It's not only predominantly in one community, but scattered across the island.
Okay, and just a couple more questions. So
Sure.
you mentioned that you have right now backlog of about 7,400 double poles that are left.
Mhm.
How long do you anticipate it would take to remove these? And does HECO already have a plan in place and a timeline set, like a goal of how long it's going to take to remove these double poles?
Okay, so we do have a commitment that we wanted to remove all these poles within 10 years, this backlog within 10 years. However, expediting it, is a possibility, but it all depends upon budget as well. I guess, how much money that we can actually afford to address on this double pole issue.
Okay, so 10 years from to this
2000,
year.
no, 2018. So we're in year 3, 4, I believe. So another 6 years possibly. Yeah.
Okay, so the plan is to have the 7,000 removed within the
Correct.
next 6 years.
Yes. At the same time, work on a proactive plan to not perpetuate the double poles as poles get replaced every year. So like Chair Johansson said, the double pole issue, we are adding to the double pole issue, but I like to think of it as a steep ramp that we once had. It's slowly declining. It's still at an upward trend because we are replacing poles today. We are adding to that double poles, but we're taking big chunks out of the backlog where poles were just not getting removed previously.
Okay, great. Thank you, Paul. Any other questions?
I did want to point out, I apologize. There was one part of the resolution that I wanted to clarify, and it's in my testimony. I think there was mention about Oahu having over 100,000 poles, but actually our pole fleet is closer to 70,000. I just wanted to point that out. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, Paul.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we're going to move on to our next item on the agenda, HCR 53, HR 48. This is requesting the Department of Education to establish programs and educational opportunities to increase media literacy and promote digital citizenship. So first up to testify, we have the DOE in support.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Kitagawa, Chair Johansson, and members of the committee. I'm Raymond Fujino, TA Director for the Office of Curriculum and Instructional Design on behalf of Interim Superintendent Keith Hayashi. The department stands on its written testimony in support of this.
Great.
Thank you
So much, Raymond. We also have oppositional testimony from one individual. Is there anyone else wanting to testify on this measure? Okay, seeing none, any questions, committee members? Seeing no questions, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, HCR 54, HR 49. This is urging the United States Congress to enact legislation to address the rise in illegal text messages. For this measure, committee, we did not receive any testimony, so we will move on to our next agenda item is HCR 39, HR 34. This is requesting the state and city and county of Honolulu to convene a working group to collaborate on multi-jurisdictional stream maintenance. First up to testify, we have DLNR in opposition.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair, Chair, members of the committee, Russell Tsuji for DLNR. We respectfully submitted testimony in opposition to this matter. As we laid out in our testimony, we believe HRS 4611.5 governs this area and already lays out the respective responsibilities for streams. I do want to say though, we did state in our end of our testimony that we're willing to participate in a working group, but we believe the chair of that committee should be really the counties, because they are the ones that are tasked with the primary responsibility for stream maintenance. Especially, they've been delegated also the power to enforce if, as far as anyone from the private sector not maintaining their portion of the stream. I'm here to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on this measure? Okay, committee members, any questions? I have a question, Russell, if you don't mind.
Yes.
So I just more in general about the stream maintenance. So how does someone right now determine stream ownership and responsibility? Is there like a database that someone could go to determine?
As far as I know, there is no database. What it is it's real estate based. It a lot of times more often than not, the owners of a stream, the way you determine it is take a quick look at the ownership of anyone abutting the stream. Often those properties in their deeds, when they have the property description, and to a lot of landowners' surprise, will go sometimes the entirety of the stream to the other side, or oftentimes, more often, and also in the middle of the stream. So you often have a stream that may be owned or made by various owners in that area, and it can be from both sides of the stream. Yeah. So that's generally what it is. I think, frankly, from what I've seen in the heavy rains throughout my years at DLNR, Oahu has had some flooding, but I think some of the problems might be from the private stream areas, which is more difficult to maintain. And oftentimes the homeowners are not aware that their property lines go into the stream. But the townies are the ones that are tasked to keep the streams flowing and drainage ways to the ocean or wherever it's going out clear. And they're authorized also to, if they wanted to pursue any enforcement action against for someone who's not maintaining the stream. And that includes, the state of Hawaii also is responsible for whatever lands or streams that may be coming under our lands, but it would be basically the state lands. So like at the University of Hawaii in Manoa, when there was flooding in Manoa, there was portions of that area that was under the University of Hawaii. But that area was also some under DLNR, some under the county by the bridge, and a lot of private owners along that stream on the Manoa stream side. I don't know if that helps, but as far as I know, there's no database that quickly gives you an answer on that. Oftentimes we eyeball it and we can more or less tell, but who owns the properties by the stream. That is the problem. And if we do a check, we can probably confirm that.
Okay, and I guess maybe just for your opinion too, and like you mentioned in your example with Manoa, Kaneohe and the windward side, we have a lot of streams that have multi-jurisdictions. So, and I'm trying to figure out how do we better manage stream maintenance so that we don't get a point where we're having flooding and we're experiencing damage to homes and property. And so in your opinion, what would be a suggestion of how we better manage and maintain our streams that have multiple owners?
When you're talking private owners?
Yeah, like private.
That's a hard one. I think probably got to bring in the counties to assist. I tell you how we do it, on Oahu, from DLNR side, we kind of have an idea. Our land agents and our small limited land crew have an idea of the big streams that we kind of check to make sure whenever a storm is coming, to make sure it's clear. I would expect the county does the same thing as well whenever a storm is approaching. Again, how do we do that as far as the private sector? I don't have an answer for you, Vice Chair, today. I mean, I never, I know it's a difficult task. The counties have that responsibility, but I'm sure that they have been probably haven't quite figured that out either.
Is DLNR in contact with the counties who are the department that's in charge of stream maintenance? Do you work together with them?
We probably communicate. I believe the department would be the facilities maintenance department there at the county.
But you don't
but then
collaborate.
from our perspective, our approach is it's more from our responsibility side or our area, or if there's a question about is it the state or county jurisdiction on that matter. Counties generally have the jurisdiction for maintenance of the stream, except sometimes if it is our stream, we'll take care of our side of it. So
But
that
there's
to
no
that extent, so it's not a regular conversation with them.
It's not like a collaborative effort that takes place.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. Any other questions? No. Okay. We'll move on to our next agenda item. Our last resolution is HCR 115. HR 115. This is requesting the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs Division of Financial Institutions and the Hawaii Technology Development Corporation to extend the Digital Currency Innovation Lab pilot project. First up to testify, we have Dcca DFI with comments.
Aloha chairs. My name is Iris Ikeda. I'm the commissioner for the Division of Financial Institutions, Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. We appreciate the intent of this resolution, and we actually prefer the bill setting forth the regulatory schemes for the protection of consumers. We also like to point out that the Digital Currency Innovation Lab has little regulatory enforcement authority. To the end that you folks are trying to extend our innovation lab, we suggest some amendments to make it clear that we would be open to that if we do not have the regulatory scheme that we're proposing this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Iris. Next, we have HTDC in support.
Thank you, chairs. Members of the committee, Len Higashi, Hawaii Technology Development Corporation. We support the intent of this bill. We share the concerns of Commissioner Ikeda, and we want to emphasize the economic development opportunity really lies with the bill and the new regulatory regime. So we're very hopeful that it should pass this session. But of course, we are supportive of continuing, our support for digital currency, and we'll be happy to continue the lab should the bill not pass. But we're supportive of the changes that Commissioner recommended as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Len. Next up, we have the Grassroots Institute of Hawaii offering comments. Not here. Okay. And we also had one individual offering comments as well. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on this measure? Okay, seeing none, committee, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to our last agenda item, and I'm going to turn it over now to Chair Johansson.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Our last agenda item is SB 2685 relating to planned community associations, and this would establish requirements for cumulative voting and the removal of directors of planned community associations. It exempts planned community associations from certain requirements regarding cumulative voting for and the removal of directors under the Hawaii Nonprofit Corporations Act. On this measure, we have the Hawaii State Association of Parliamentarians, Steve Glanstein, in support.
Good afternoon, Chair Johansson, Vice Chair Kitagawa, committee members. Thank you very much for this opportunity to testify. I have provided written testimony, and I stand on the written testimony available for questions, and a special shout out thanks for the committee for reaching out for more clarification.
Thank you very much, Steve. We also have Larry McGuire on behalf of CAI in support. Who is not here. We also have Associa in support, the Hawaii Council for Association of Apartment Owners in support, as well as numerous individuals offering support on this particular measure. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on SB 2685? Okay, seeing no further testifiers, members, any questions? Okay, seeing no questions, then we'll recess for decision making. Recess.
reconvening today's CPC hearing for decision-making. First up on our agenda is HCR 46, HR 41. This is relating to the U.S. Department of Energy having a permanent presence within the state. The recommendation is to pass this measure as is. Committee members, any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, chair for the vote, please.
Okay, the recommendation on HCR 46 and HR 41 is to pass unamended. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Aquino is excused. Representative Carr is excused. Representative Hashem is excused. Representative Pa.
Aye.
Thank you. Representative Mizuno.
Aye.
Thank you. Representative Morikawa.
Aye.
Thank you. Representative Onishi.
Aye.
Thank you. Representative Tarnas.
Aye.
And Representative Matsumoto.
Aye.
Thank you. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next up, we have HCR 47, HR 42. This is relating to a working group for electric vehicle charging systems in multi-unit dwellings. The recommendation is to pass with a couple of amendments. So first is to designate that the representative from the Hawaii State Energy Office will serve as chairperson and convener of the working group. We'd also like to note that the Hawaii State Energy Office chairperson can designate another member of the working group as the chairperson if it is mutually agreed upon. We'll also be inserting another be it further resolved section on page 4, beginning at line 36, which will include a report to be submitted to the legislature by the working group 20 days prior to the convening of the regular session of 2023. Committee members, any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, chair for the vote, please.
Okay, the recommendation is to pass HCR 47, HR 42 with amendments, noting the excused absences of Representatives Aquino and Carr. Are there any reservations? Are there any no's? Okay, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Great, thank you very much. Next up, we have HCR 6, HR 2. This is relating to Red Hill. The recommendation is to pass with a few amendments. So starting on page 5, line 23, we'll be inserting additional information to ensure that this resolution is accurate with current events that have occurred since the resolution was submitted earlier this session. The amendments will reflect the updated policy and plan by the Secretary of Defense, as well as highlight the federal funding that has been appropriated to address this crisis. The amendments will also include the potential adverse impacts to the aquifer and water supply. And we will also be changing the title to remove the Navy and replace it with the Department of Defense. We'll also have technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. Committee members, any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, chair for the vote, please.
Okay, the recommendation on HCR 6 and HR 2 is to pass with amendments, noting the excused absences of Representatives Aquino and Har, who will be noted as excused for the rest of the agenda. Are there any reservations? Are there any no's? Okay, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next up, we have HCR 28 relating to health insurance for fertility preservation. The recommendation is to pass with amendments. We will be taking the amendments which are offered by HMSA, Kaiser, and the Hawaii Association of Health Plans. They are all the same amendments. We'll be taking them and they outline more specifically what the auditor should be looking at in regards to this study. Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, chair for the vote, please.
Okay, the recommendation on HCR 28 is to pass.
With amendments.
The wrong box there. Noting the excused absences of Representative Aquino and Har, are there any reservations? Are there any no's? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next up, HCR 33 relating to early access breast cancer screenings. The recommendation is to pass as is. Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, chair for the vote.
Okay, recommendation on HCR 33 is to pass unamended. Noting the previous excused absences, are there any reservations? Are there any no's? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next up is HCR 66, HR 60 relating to telehealth and telephonic service working group. The recommendation is to pass with a couple of amendments. So first off, on page 2, starting at line 22, we'll be changing the representatives from the House and Senate who are appointed by the Speaker of the House and Senate President to the chair of the Committee on Health, Human Services, and Homelessness in the House or their designee, and the chair of the Committee on Health in the Senate or their designee, who will serve as co-chairpersons of this working group. We'll also be changing on page 3, line 1, making it plural, so from chairperson to co-chairpersons. On line 5, the representative from the Department of Health will be changed to the director of the Department of Health or their designee. And we will also allow the co-chairpersons to invite others to be a part of this working group. Are there any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, Chair for the vote, please.
Thank you. The recommendation on HCR 66 and HR 60 is to pass with amendments noting the previously excused members. Are there any reservations? Are there any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next up is HCR 69, HR 62, designating the month of September 2022 as Child Care Provider Appreciation Month. The recommendation is to pass this measure as is. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, Chair for the vote.
Okay, thank you. The recommendation on HCR 69, HR 62 is to pass unamended, noting the previously excused absences of members. Are there any reservations? Are there any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next up is HCR 43, HR 38, relating to redundant utility poles. The recommendation is to defer this measure. It seems like from testimony and from today's hearing that HECO is already working on the removal of redundant utility poles across the island and is doing what this resolution is requesting. However, the committee would like to ask that HECO continue to update the legislature, specifically the author of this resolution, on its continuing effort to remove double poles. So this measure is deferred. Next up, HCR 53, HR 48, relating to the DOE increasing media literacy and promoting digital citizenship for students. The recommendation for this measure is to pass as is. Any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, Chair, for the vote.
Recommendation on HCR 53, HR 48 is to pass unamended, noting the previously excused absences. Are there any reservations? Are there any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next up is HCR 54, HR 49, relating to illegal text messages. The recommendation is to defer this measure since there was no testimony and the Senate's version will be crossing over soon. Next up is HCR 39, HR 34. This is relating to multi-jurisdictional stream maintenance. The recommendation for this is also to defer this measure. However, I'd like to note just the importance of the continued conversation related to the responsibility of stream maintenance. And, over the past few years, we've seen just an increase in heavy rains and flash flooding. And so I think it's really important for the state and the city and county to work together and collaborate to figure out how best to maintain our streams, including having private owners be involved in this process. But this measure will be deferred. Okay, our last resolution for today, HCR 115, HR 115, relating to the Digital Currency Innovation Lab pilot project. The recommendation is to pass with amendments. So we will be taking the 3 amendments offered by the Division of Financial Institutions, which updates statistics and clarifies how the Digital Currency Innovation Lab can be extended until June 30th, 2024. And in the committee report, I'd also like to note that that the preference is for the regulatory structure through either HB 2108 or SB 3025. However, if those measures do not pass, then we would like to have the Innovation Lab continue through this resolution. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, Chair for the vote, please.
Okay, the recommendation on HCR 115, HR 115 is to pass with amendments noting the previously excused members. Are there any reservations? Are there any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. And I'd like to turn the agenda over back to Chair Johansson for our last bill.
Okay, thank you, members, and thank you, Vice Chair, for doing an amazing job on the rest of the agenda. On SB 2685, SD2 relating to planned community associations, the recommendation here is to pass with amendments. I'd like to take the Association of Parliamentarians amendments regarding the delayed date language, but instead of adding the date that they requested, which is January 1, 2023, which would make it essentially an effective date and the bill without flaw, I deliberately want to insert January 1, 2050. But note in the committee report that I do agree with the parliamentarians that there should be a delay in the effective date to ensure that there's time to transition to this new process, as well as making various technical and non-substantive amendments for consistency, clarity, and style. Members, any questions on the recommendations to pass with amendment? Okay, seeing none, then Vice Chair for the vote, please.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 2685 SD2 with amendments noting the excused absences of Representatives Aquino and Har. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you.
Today's CPC hearing is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.